So this is Eric Hoffer from his work First Things, Last Things, and it's about city and nature, and it looks at this what one could call the naturalist fallacy between artificial constructions like cities and technologies versus nature. And he really comes out on the side of cities. So I'm just going to get to it. Hoffer asserts, he says, so true is it that the city is man's optimal creative milieu or environment, that even communion with the self is more attainable in the press and noise of the city than in the silence of the great outdoors. There is no genuine solitude outside the city. That's what Hoffer says. I mean, I think people like Henry David Thoreau would strongly disagree and assert that nature's where it's at. Same with like Emerson and that take. But Hoffer's like, look, our greatest accomplishments are in the city. They're a function of technology. Um, Hoffer continues, he says, for nature is both around and within us, though the city has been the headquarters of the great movement of the human spirit to emancipate or free itself from the tyranny of matter, right? The slavery of matter. It has also been the place where man has been losing his battle with the nature that is sealed within him. The city has not freed man from the tyranny of his lusts, his savage impulses, his ferocious malice, and the dark destructive forces that lie in wait in the cellars of his psyche. If God is that which makes man human, and the devil is that which dehumanizes him, then it is in the city and not in heaven that God and the devil are in perpetual combat. And so this notion that the best and the worst can be found in cities, and I mean cities are, I mean, there's where you find the kind of prostitution and the violence and the kind of usuries, much more so than you would in nature and in the country. Um, but Hoffer has the spin. He's like, the city's where it's at too. The best and the worst. Hash it out in the city. Hoffer continues, he says, my hunch is that to keep stable and healthy, a free, affluent, or rich society must become a creative society. See, here's where it gets really interesting. I'm going to read that again. My hunch is that to keep stable and healthy, a free, affluent, or wealthy society must become a creative society. The destructive forces released by affluence must serve to fuel the creative process. There are indications that creativeness has its source in the tension between that which is most human and most inhuman in us. And so, on a kind of technological level, this becomes so interesting with respect to how, immediately with like computer technologies and the internet, we have the rise of internet pornography and Pornhub and that kind of stuff. And this, as well as, we discover the genome and we break down all these kind of like scientific endeavors. So you kind of see the best and the worst hashing it out in the artificial. I think that's the general argument. The sublimity or that highest excellence of man manifests itself not in the purity and nobility of his impulses and motives, but in the alchemy of his soul, right? That magical mystery of the soul, which transmutes meanness and savagery into things of beauty and into thoughts and visions which reach into heaven. And so that's a kind of crazy thing, right? We can take the worst and creatively turn it into the best. So all right, he continues. He says, we cope best with the devil not by fighting, but by using him. Fighting the devil is at best a holding operation. A society preoccupied with the deliberate mastery of men is bound to lose much of its creative venturesomeness in both the material and spiritual spheres. And so, this idea of kind of like permitting. Um, Desires such as what, like gambling or moderate drug use or alcohol or even, you could kind of question things like prostitution, but then taxing them absorbently because, that stuff plays out in the city. All that stuff plays out in the city, and you can't just let things run amok. But in my life, I've seen like cigarettes get taxed from virtually nothing, to like multiple dollars a pack. I mean, the most expensive thing on a pack of cigarettes is the tax, and it's because that tax pays for the harm that those cigarettes do. All right, we cope best with the devil not by fighting, but by using him, according to Hoffer. Okay, it is my belief that all the test questions can be found in the video in red.